You spent 12 years in a classroom, maybe 16 if you went to college. You learned algebra, the periodic table, the causes of World War I, how to dissect a frog. You can probably still recite the quadratic formula if someone put a gun to your head. But here's what nobody taught you: how a credit card actually works, what a 401k is, how tax brackets function, why rent costs half your paycheck, how to read a loan agreement, the difference between good debt and bad debt. You graduated, walked across a stage, got handed a diploma, and then walked straight into a financial system designed to extract money from people who don't understand it. And that's not an accident. That's a feature. Let's start with a simple question. Why do schools teach calculus to every student, but not compound interest? Why do they require 4 years of English Lit, but not a single semester on how insurance works? It's not because teachers don't care. It's not because the information doesn't exist. It's because the education system was never designed to produce financially independent people. It was designed to produce employees. And before you think this is some conspiracy theory rant, let's look at history. Modern public education in the United States was modeled after the Prussian system in the 1800s. The goal? Create obedient workers for the Industrial Revolution. People who could follow instructions, show up on time, and do repetitive tasks without asking too many questions. Financial literacy wasn't part of the curriculum because factory workers didn't need to understand capital allocation. They just needed to show up and work. Fast forward 150 years, the factories are gone, but the system? Still here, still running on the same operating principles, and still not teaching you how money works. Here's how the cycle works. You finish school with no financial education. You get your first credit card because they're handing them out on campus like flyers. Interest rates? APR? Minimum payments? Nobody explained it, so you figure it out the hard way. You start spending. The bill comes. You pay the minimum. Seems fine, until you realize that a $3,000 balance at 19% interest, if you only pay the minimum, takes 14 years to pay off and costs you $4,200 in interest, almost double what you borrowed. But you didn't know that because nobody taught you. Then you need a car. The dealer offers financing, 72 months at 7%. Sounds reasonable, except now you're paying $35,000 for a car worth $28,000, and in 5 years, when it's worth $12,000, you still owe $15,000. You're underwater, trapped. But hey, at least you can recite Shakespeare. Then comes the big one, student loans. You're 18 years old. You're told college is the only path to success, so you sign a promissory note for $80,000 without anyone explaining what that actually means. 4 years later, you graduate. You get a job making $45,000. Your loan payment? $800 a month for 10 years. Except if you can't afford that, you go on an income-driven repayment plan. Now it's 20 years, and the interest keeps accruing. You end up paying $140,000 for an $80,000 loan, and the degree you got doesn't even guarantee the income you need to pay it off. This isn't bad luck. This is what happens when you send financially illiterate people into a system built on debt. So why doesn't the school system fix this? Because the people who benefit from your ignorance have more influence than you do. Banks make $120 billion a year in credit card interest. The student loan industry is worth $1.7 trillion. The auto loan market, another $1.5 trillion. These industries don't want you to understand how debt works. They want you to sign on the dotted line and figure it out later. And it's not just corporations, it's the government too. Think about it. If everyone understood tax strategy, they'd pay way less. If everyone knew how to build wealth through assets, they'd stop being dependent on social programs. If everyone knew how to negotiate salaries and benefits, labor costs would skyrocket. The system doesn't want a population of financially savvy people. It wants a population of consumers, people who spend money they don't have on things they don't need to impress people they don't like. And schools? They're funded by the government. They follow state standards, and those standards are written by people who benefit from keeping financial literacy optional. Now let's contrast this with what actually gets taught. You know what's mandatory in most states? Physical education, health class, arts. All great, all important, but you can graduate high school without knowing what a Roth IRA is, without understanding how a mortgage works, without being able to calculate the real cost of a lease versus a purchase. There are 50 states in the U.S. As of 2023, only 25 require any kind of financial literacy course for high school graduation. And even in those states, it's often a half-semester elective crammed in next to home ec. Compare that to math. 4 years mandatory. English, 4 years mandatory. You'll learn the symbolism in The Great Gatsby, but you won't learn why Gatsby's wealth was built on speculation and fraud. You'll memorize the mitochondria, but not the tax code. Here's the absurdity. The average American will earn $2 million over their lifetime. Managing that money is literally a multi-million-dollar decision, and we spend zero time teaching people how to do it. Instead, we teach them trigonometry, which, unless you become an engineer, you will never use again. So what's the actual cost of this? Let's do the math. The average American carries $6,000 in credit card debt. At 18% interest, that costs them $1,080 a year just in interest. Over a lifetime, that's $43,000 down the drain, for nothing. Then add car loans. The average car payment in the U.S. is now $700 a month. Over 6 years, that's $50,000, but the car depreciates to $15,000. You just burned $35,000 in value. Student loans? The average borrower pays $30,000 in interest alone over the life of the loan, and that's if they don't default or go into forbearance, which adds even more. Now add it up. Credit cards, car loans, student loans. The average person loses over $100,000 in their lifetime to bad financial decisions that could have been avoided with a single semester of education. And that's not even counting the opportunity cost, the money they could have invested instead, the compound growth they missed out on. $100,000 gone because nobody taught them how interest works. Here's what makes this even worse. Financial illiteracy doesn't just hurt individuals, it destabilizes entire economies. When people don't understand debt, they borrow too much. When they borrow too much, they default. When they default, banks collapse. Remember 2008? That wasn't just greedy bankers. That was millions of people signing mortgage agreements they didn't understand for houses they couldn't afford. And when it all fell apart, the taxpayers bailed out the banks, but nobody bailed out the people who lost their homes. And it's happening again. Credit card debt just hit an all-time high. Auto loan delinquencies are spiking. Student loan defaults are climbing. We're watching the same cycle play out in real time, and still schools aren't teaching financial literacy because the people in charge benefit from the chaos. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Financial illiteracy isn't taught because it's a threat to the status quo. If people understood money, they'd stop making the mistakes that keep the machine running. They'd save more, spend less, demand better wages, question authority, build wealth instead of renting it. The system doesn't want that. The system wants obedience. It wants predictability. It wants you to graduate, get a job, take on debt, and spend the next 40 years paying it off. And if you're too busy working to pay bills, you won't have time to ask why the game is rigged. That's the uncomfortable truth. Schools don't teach you about money because an educated population is a dangerous population. So what do you do with that? You can wait for the system to change, or you can take responsibility and teach yourself. Read books, watch videos like this, learn how compound interest works, understand the difference between assets and liabilities, figure out how taxes actually function, because the education system failed you, but that doesn't mean you have to stay ignorant. The game is rigged, but the rules are publicly available, and once you learn them, you can stop playing defense and start playing offense. The question is, will you?